in a call center working for US customers, providing technical support on their products, including connectivity. So there I learned a lot about how computers work, and I was actually good at it. So I started, thinking, what should I do? I started researching to see if I could change majors, maybe, and I don't know, pursue a degree in computer science instead. But all the math turned me off. So yeah, I took some courses here and there, but better than I do how fast technology evolves. So it was really impossible to catch up while also working on my law degree. So then, as I said, I graduated as a lawyer, but I didn't want to be one. How funny, right? So I started exploring other prospects. I've always liked diplomacy and international relations. So I did a graduate program on that. I did a couple of fellowships abroad, and later I gained a mission to pursue my master's in international relations at Harvard, where I concentrated in international security. Here is where my possibilities felt endless, infinite. And following some peer pressure, I enrolled in CS50. Some of you may know about it because it's also a course that is free and available online through EDX. It's an introductory class to computer science, or to the art of programming, as they like to call it. And it blew my mind. It was the most frustrating thing I ever had to do, but also the most satisfying. Like how, but yeah. I really couldn't believe I was able to do those things. I was able to code. I was able to understand what was going on. So of course, like, given my background, I never thought of like switching gears completely and becoming a developer, but instead I started thinking of ways to link my interests and find my own niche. You know what I mean? So international relations kind of prepares you for a lot of things, a lot of roles, provides you with wonderful and transferable skills to thrive in multiple fields, industries, etc. But the market actually wants specialists, and I was a generalist. So one of the best experiences, I think, during my master's was interning at the United Nations in Vienna, in Austria. There, I finally confirmed where I wanted to work. It was there where I wanted to put all my knowledge and experience in practice, and for the service of a greater good, for a bigger impact. But how? Like, I was still very confused on how to put all these pieces together, So the first question that I needed to answer was what was my purpose? I had this legal background, policy experience, a decent international exposure, but very limited chances of landing a higher job than an internship in such a competitive market. So I found myself, I need to find that thing that makes me unique, different, something that hasn't been explored enough or yet even. And that was the intersection of law, technology, and public policy, international security. And here comes the why question. I was determined to be that nexus. I wanted to be the middle person between the regulators and the innovators. So nowadays, as you know already, like, individuals go beyond sharing information for making calls, filing taxes, etc. We're constantly using internet, the circulation of smartphones, the spread of social media, and even artificial intelligence-based applications have made the propagation of data in a way that seems uncontrollable. So public and private entities, both and civil society and academia as well, collect that massive amount of data people produce and share online. And that is not without consequences. Bam, I'm getting closer, right? So in academia, as I said, public sector, private, civil society, and even international organizations, there is a need for someone to understand both worlds. So to go beyond theory, you know, that's what I mean, to go beyond theory and to be able to understand what's behind it, right? In order to be able to find concrete solutions. So I was thinking to myself, how are we going to help our clients who have a tech company if we have no idea what they do, right? How are we going to be able to properly regulate technology while respecting human rights if we do not fully understand what we're dealing with? How are we going to find this so needed consensus in so many areas that touch upon technology if we don't know what we're talking about? If we stay with the theory, like if we have a broad idea of what we're talking about, we got to get hands on. So I wanted to be part of those conversations. And in international security was always something that I was interested in. But, you know, growing up in Argentina, I actually didn't know I could possibly pursue a career in counterterrorism, or CT for short. Like that's something that it's not as advanced or exploited academically or in the job market. So it's not like here in the US or in other countries that you can, you know, you can choose to major in terrorism studies or in national security studies or things of the sort. So I started looking for programs to get specialized, right? And then that's when Syracuse came along. I was still in Buenos Aires. So the U.S. Embassy there usually organizes education fairs, and there was its LLM fair at the Sheraton Hotel. For those who don't know, an LLM is a Master of Laws. Most universities here in the US target their programs for foreign trained lawyers. So you can fulfill the requirements to take the bar exam and be licensed to practice law here in the states that allow it. But JD graduates or Juris Doctors, so those who actually go through the 3 years of law school, can also pursue an LLM if they want to get specialized in a special area. So in a certain area. So I wanted both. I wanted to fulfill the requirements to take the bar, although it wasn't something, you know, that I was desperate, you know, in the near future. I didn't see myself sitting for the bar immediately after graduation, but I did want to have that opportunity open, and I wanted to specialize in the convergence of law and technology. And I met there in this fair, I met the dean of international programs at this conference, and he showed me the wonderful course offerings at Syracuse Law School, and it became my top option immediately. And so I also applied to other schools, of course, but I did want to attend SU for many, many reasons apart from that. Like also it was close to New York, etc. And I'm gonna go through this later. But here comes the third question, like how? For what I shared so far, you know that I like to kind of think outside of the box, find my own path, you know, try to be different or whatever. But Syracuse University, but like Syracuse, the city in general, has so many resources for students with my interests. Throughout my year there, I got involved in so many things. Student government, I was class representative, I held executive positions in many student organizations and affinity groups. I volunteered. I went to so many conferences and events, Hack Upstate included, anything that the Tech Garden would organize. I was very involved in all those things, especially for a law student, right? I also worked part-time at the Institute for Security Policy and Law, which is a think tank designated, it's inside the law school, and it was designated by the U.S. intelligence community as one of the 8 national security intelligence community centers for academic excellence. So they're used to work on research mainly on issues related to cybersecurity law, tech policy, counterterrorism. I would like participate in different tech events, like around the country, across the country. So also something that was mentioned during my introduction is that I was able to cross-register with the iSchool, with the Information Studies School. And that's where I learned to code smart contracts, like something that was completely out of my league, my thoughts. And so it was there where I became an active member of the club that one of my professors, and you may have heard about him because he's pretty famous, in the industry, Professor Lee McKnight. He advises this club, which is called White Tech. So 1 year after my graduation, I graduated last year, I'm still involved, and I also take this opportunity to invite you to a blockchain and crypto workshop that we're going to be holding in August. I'm going to send you the flyer later through the chat. And so as I was averaging my second semester of my LLM, I landed an internship at the UN here in New York, where I'm currently in New York City, to work against the use of technology for terrorism and extremist purposes, and how ICT is also used to counter terrorism while respecting and promoting human rights. What of a challenge, right? But I loved it. I also started working with the company that ended up offering me a full-time job after graduation, and Cyan. It's a company originally, a tech company originally from Finland, with offices in Syracuse at the Case Center, actually inside SU. At Cyan, I started off as an expansion manager, and then my last position was VP of Global Accounts. I was basically overseeing and negotiating all our partnerships worldwide to commercialize our products. I'm going to send you the link so you know also what the company is about. Is really exciting. And it's good for you to know that in case they're hiring, that they are right there at the Case Center. And then I landed my current job, again at the UN, at the Security Council Counterterrorism Committee Executive Director. Oof, so long. So we call it CTED for short. And here I work with multiple stakeholders, including member states, of course, but also the research community, private sector, civil society. And through this kind of collaborative exchange of information and analysis, at CTED, we are able to keep abreast of emerging terrorism trends, developments, challenges, as well, of course, add effective approaches to address them. So this is how I kind of answered my questions that got me here. So start thinking about how you can answer your what, why, and how. Right? It's like, it's not always that straightforward. It was challenging for me, and it still is. For people like me, like, it's always very difficult for them to see me as a different kind of lawyer. For example, I recently finished a postgraduate degree in Barcelona in compliance and cybersecurity. And while all my classmates wanted to intern for firms, I wanted to, because it was the internship was a very short one. It was part of the curriculum. I wanted to intern at a cybersecurity company. So I wanted to see what they did, the dynamics in the incident responses, how they audited companies, how they even wrote forensic reports involving, for example, WhatsApp conversations, communications, digital evidence, chain of custody, etc. So I wanted to learn the techie part from the ones who worked on it every day. And also for them was pretty challenging to task me, right? Because they didn't know how much I knew about it, and they couldn't believe I was willing to learn more, to take an online course to catch up or whatever. So again, I would say that try to think of this as the sign for you to just like sit down, think, and find your passion, research a lot, find the purpose and how to implement it. I'm not American. That was always a huge obstacle for me, for everything, for scholarships, for jobs, plenty of opportunities I couldn't even apply for because I was on a visa. But I still found my ways, you know, and to accomplish all this, one of the best skills you will need is networking. Just research and ask for informational interviews. Get your business cards down now. Like as we finish this call, get it done. I used to have an Excel spreadsheet with all my contacts, where I met them, what they do, what we talked about, when I followed up, when we met for coffee, or when we had a call, etc. I'll be happy to go through the details if you're interested, but I will like, or you can always like, I will leave all my contact information if you want to keep talking about this. I'll be happy to help. But I would like to wrap my remarks so we have some time for Q&A. Really encouraging you to think, to ask questions, to put yourself out there, to find your passion and just go for it. I mean, it's never too late. I'm not 20 years old. Build that profile that will impress your dream job hiring managers. You know, set your mind to it. I feel like a motivational speaker or something, but honestly, there's like no magic, just determination and a lot of hard work. I would come from Syracuse to New York sometimes for the day to 10 events or conference because I knew that X or Y was going to be there, and I want them to see my face, and I want to shake their hand and have the opportunity to exchange a few words. And then, you got to make sacrifices sometimes. And not every story is the same. I had zero resources of my own. So I really hope that you had like a glimpse of my career path. You can, of course, see more on my LinkedIn and my website, although it's in Spanish, but I'm sorry, web devs. I use the GoDaddy tool because I needed it overnight. So don't judge me. I needed it for an opportunity in Spain. So I never even had the time to go back and make it nicer or even work on the English version. But if anyone wants to help, be my guest. So I think, I don't know, enough for me about me. I would like to hear about you, your questions. So while we set up the Q&A, I'll be copying in the chat the links I've been referring to, including an Instagram account that was intended to provide legal Latinas with tech resources online. It's called Geek Latinas because I figured that most of the courses for you to, get self-taught on technology were in English. So I started to compile all the tools and courses that were in Spanish because, I was trying to bridge two gaps, the gap between women and technology and the gap between law and technology. So I hope you take a look. And I think that's for now. To you, Dana.
Tanya, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I feel like you're three people instead of one. I did take an opportunity while you were talking to copy and paste your LinkedIn information into the chat, as well as the English version of your website that I found, and also some information on another article that I found on the internet. But without further delay, we have a few minutes left. If anyone has any questions, feel free to take yourself. Did you want to go through the questions in the chat? The first three questions are from me. You can skip those.
Okay, let's see.
I was just, I made a couple of comments though. So the first one was just you, when you mentioned that you got a job at Microsoft in their call center, I was like, wow, how do you do that? But you know what? It's obvious to see that you're a really determined person. So, I mean, that just speaks volumes. But I did have a question in the chat, which was, have you been involved in trying to resolve the oil chain supply hack, or do you get involved when other major hacks happen in the US or abroad?
Okay, so to answer quickly your first question, like how did I got to the call center? Like actually, it wasn't that hard. Like speaking English very well was my only asset as I graduated high school. So they just trained us to do all the rest, So I knew that there were these companies like Teletech, like Teleperformance, that outsource technical support and customer service services to other countries, and that's how I was able to get a job there and work at Microsoft as my first job, providing technical support. And regarding the second question,
are you involved in resolving major hacks?
In major hacks? And actually, no, because I don't work for the American government. I don't work for the federal government. I am not a U.S. citizen, so I cannot even apply. But it would have been exciting, to be honest.
Thank you so much for answering my question. Does anyone else have any other questions? I don't see any questions in the chat, but would anyone like to come off of mute? We have a couple of minutes left. Feel free.
Might be kind of a silly question, but like you almost sound like a super agent spy type person. I'm just wondering, like, are there any safety issues that are related to your job? Like, do you have to take special precautions or anything?
I actually never thought about that. No, not really. Like, I currently work for the UN, and our work is very diplomacy oriented. So right now we, like, for example, it would be different, and I'm in New York, so probably would be different if I was working in the field. We have many colleagues that are in very difficult areas around the world that are literally risking their lives because there are hotspots for terrorist attacks and other kinds of attacks. So in that sense, I am very privileged and lucky to be working in the offices here in New York. But I might get transferred or destined to some other place and work in the field, and that will be fine.
We did have one question come in. It's from Brielle. She says, how big of an increase in cyber terrorism have you seen in the last few years?
Well, yes, especially after the pandemic. So the pandemic, I think one of the biggest impacts of the pandemic in this area was the fact that terrorists and violent extremists found themselves with a captive audience online. And so they found ways like throughout the ideological spectrum to exacerbate existing grievances and take advantage of them. So whether it is to start, cyber attacks for terrorism financing, ransomware, things of the sort, or like how resources and attention has been, more into building capacity to contain the pandemic and putting all the resources to the health crisis. And these people know how to, with their narratives, they know how to get into the discourse and to young people, and to try to find them new ways of seeing a reality and try to challenge the status quo. And we've been seeing that in so many ways, and in the US as well. Spreading misinformation, trying to find a common enemy to blame for the pandemic, depending on the ideology that we're talking about. So I think that in that sense is very, very, very challenging. And you can find on the website, on the CTID's website, I'm gonna put it on your chat right now so you can see it. We just launched like a couple of weeks ago the updated report on the impact of COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic on terrorism, counterterrorism, and countering violent extremism. It's a very thorough report, and you can see the previous ones on other publications on the website as well. But this gives you an idea of how the use of ICT is growing for terrorist purposes and violent extremist purposes, but this is not new with the pandemic. I know if I'm making myself clear, you know, like I think that and according to researchers and this is what this report is showing us, is that it exacerbated existing grievances that these people are trying to take advantage from.
Betania, thank you so much for that wonderful talk. We really enjoyed you as a guest speaker. We are at time, and if there's anyone else who has any questions that they just thought of and would like to reach out to Betania, what is the best way to get a response from you? Would it be through LinkedIn, your email?
Yeah, sure. I think LinkedIn is great because
Okay.
we can take that to a call. I'll be happy to talk to you, and you know, just try to. I was just trying to, you know, pick your brains a little bit, see how from my experience you can relate and probably start thinking of how this, you know, can help you in your path towards your passion and what you want to do, how to get there. It's a very frustrating journey. I'm not going to say it's easy, and I haven't reached, you know, the peak or anything, but at least I've seen results from all these efforts that I've been doing. And that's why I want to share them with you. And I still reach to mentors. I still reach out to people who have more experience. And this is something that you're never done, you know, like like once you reach this milestone, you want to go for the next one, but you never forget to enjoy the part that you are living right now.
Once again, thank you so much for coming to Careers in Code, inspiring the students, and allowing the students to reach out to you via LinkedIn. I was inspired, and that's it. That's it. I'm sure they're ready to dive back into their work. Wow. All I can say is just wow. I'll probably be reaching out myself with a few questions.
Please do. I'll be happy to help. Like a lot of people helped me, and like the least I can do is to help.
Okay, and all of the links that we've put into the chat, I'll go ahead and make sure that you all have that information in Slack. And without further ado, we'll turn the class over to Max to get started on this week's module.
Okay, thank you so much.
Have a good night now.
You too. Should I sign out?
You can, if you want to hang around and listen to class for a little while and check out what the students are learning, you're welcome to hang around.
Oh, that would be exciting. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I can stay for a little bit.
All right, I'm sure Max would love that.
Awesome. Well, let's kick it off with our normal weekly stand-up. What did we cover last week? We covered wireframing. What tool did we wireframe in? We used a full stack project. We used diagrams.net to do our wireframes, kind of get into the mockup a little bit, start planning things out. What other things did we do in the planning process? We got into the tables. Dominique, yep, absolutely. We practiced in Beehive, creating a database from scratch, getting our Postgres wired up, hopefully getting more comfortable at doing our project setup from scratch. So feeling comfortable spinning up a new Express server and getting our React working, starting with our Bootstrap, doing a little bit of React Router. Why do we need React Router? Yep, we need it so we can change pages, Brandy, you got it. So React is really good at creating what we call the single page app, or a SPA app, which you may actually hear in the industry there's a big push to moving to single page applications. And so React Router helps us be able to switch between pages, have our routes working, all of that kind of stuff. Any questions from last week? Anything pop up? I have about half of the homework graded. And if you have not turned it in, feel free to turn it in late, and I will definitely still get you guys some feedback on it. Your wireframes were looking really good. I did not get a chance to grade any of the code yet, but I should have some time to do that tomorrow. Any questions, anything lingering from last week that you want to wrap up or have a chance to ask? Module not found, Jahil, is normally one of two problems. Either you haven't npm installed the specific package, or somehow your node modules folder got deleted. So if you run npm in the correct folder in your terminal, it should resolve those issues. And then also pay attention to that error message, because it's probably not going to just say module not found. It's going to tell you something about what module is missing. It shouldn't have anything to do with Git or your untracked files. Git doesn't really use the term module. So it is likely a problem with Node or NPM, and not a problem with your Git. But if you are having problems, feel free to reach out for a one-on-one. My calendar should open up on Saturday for more one-on-ones. So feel free to grab some time with me or any of the other mentors, and they should be able to help you out with the module not found. Super, super important to get that fixed. Because we want to be able to test our code, right? It's a really dangerous rabbit hole to go, oh, well, let me just keep writing this code and then I'll get it running later. Because what you run into is error after error after error, and they become a lot harder to fix when they're all compounding on top of each other. So there's definitely a time that you want to stop and say, all right, let me try and get this fixed. Let me work through this error. Let me just, put my nose to the grindstone kind of, and really work through it until we get the error fixed. Latonia, capstone and code in general. There is not a standard. There's not a Merriam-Webster's version of a developer's thesaurus. And it gets, or dictionary, it gets even more complicated because some languages would say that is autoplay with a capital P, and others would put it all in lowercase. And even in the same language, that can differ, right? We use lowercase for our CSS class names and dashes, but in React, we camel case it and remove all the dashes. So margin dash top, all in lowercase, becomes margin top with a capital T. So unfortunately, there is no standard. There are times that you have to use one over the other, just because that's how HTML is expecting it, or whatever. But it can also be something where, as long as you are consistent, that's all that really matters. I am a complete dictator when it comes to capitalization of things. In our company's code, it is ID, always capital I, capital D. Doesn't matter if it's in the middle of a word, if there's a word after it. I am normally Mr. Camel Case, and I break convention and I say we use capital I, capital D everywhere. And so it really depends on what company you're writing code for. Hopefully they have a coding style guide, which would answer some of those questions. The Airbnb style guide is probably the most popular one for JavaScript. I don't know if, Karen, you can grab a link to that and throw it in the chat, but a Google search for JavaScript style guide Airbnb. They were kind of, I don't want to say the first ones, but they were kind of the ones who made coding style guides popular. And they should address things like, does your curly brace come on the same line as the function, or do you put it on the line underneath it? So the style guides would answer that question, but there is no definitive, everyone agrees it should be, autoplay all lowercase. Lots of different resources in the console. I think we are going to naturally run into some of them tonight when we're trying to debug or figure out what's going on there. Kind of a hard thing to do on the fly, to be like, hey, here are all these resources available to you in the console, because there are so many of them. It's one of those things that you start learning over time which are the most helpful, or like, oh, right, when I can't figure out if it's margin or padding, I can scroll all the way down to the bottom of the right pane and inspect and see the box model and see kind of where that margin and padding is coming from. So unfortunately, I don't have anything off the top of my head. And I think if I found resources on that, it would be very much like, let's go through every single screen and overload you with 1,000 different features of what you can do in the Chrome debugger. And more of one of those things that it just takes practice over time to kind of see how other developers are using it or debugging it. But debugging is kind of just a process you have to learn by hand. Latonia ran into an issue this weekend where she deployed her React code, and it was all working fine on localhost. And then when she went to deploy it, it was like her entire nav bar disappeared. And it was like, okay, well, it's working fine on my computer and it's not working when it deploys. That definitely links in, Latonia, to your last question of, you've got to go in and start debugging it, and kind of taking that approach that we did with React Router last week, when it was like, all right, this isn't working. Let's figure out what isn't working. Let's break it down into smaller chunks and figure that out. So one thing that I would do is I would use the inspect tools to see if the HTML is even there, and pop open your body tag, keep burying down and see if the HTML is there. If it is there, then you can start using the CSS pane on the right to say, hey, is it display none? Is something not getting applied here? Or if the HTML isn't there, then we can go, all right, this is like a React level problem. Maybe I'm not pulling my component in right. Maybe the file casing, when I did my import, was a little off. Mac and Windows approaches file names differently. So on the Mac, for years and years, you could have a file that was all in lowercase, and then a file name that was exactly the same with an uppercase letter instead of a lowercase, and the Mac would say, hey, those are two separate files. But on Windows, it would look at those two files, say, ignore the casing, that's the same file name, you can't name two things the same file. And so there's a lot of differences between those two. And so that's sometimes where you can run into problems with your deploy of, something's case sensitive on your computer, but it's not case sensitive where you deploy it, or vice versa. So that may be something you can look into. But again, if you're stuck, you can't figure it out, definitely schedule time for one-on-ones, because capstone wise, we'll definitely be able to help you out on that. Shahil, anything with Node, you're going to have to check to see if you have your Node modules folder in there. If you do, you need to check your package.json and see if you've got a package.json in there. And then you need to run npm install on that and see if that gets you your Node modules back. If not, it could be an installation issue with Node or npm on your computer, or some kind of weird permissions issue, but I don't think anyone else is running into that. And if they are, it's just because they forgot to like npm install a package, because I was, going through that pretty quickly. So feel free to schedule one-on-one time where I can stick around after class tonight, and try and go through that with you. Karen threw the Airbnb style guide in the Zoom chat. Thank you for that. Sure, you would not get module not found if you didn't have the require in, because the require is what is linking your code to your node modules folder. So whenever we run npm I or npm install, what we're doing is we're not only adding that package that we're installing to our package.json file. If you look in the node modules folder, you'll see like 500 different folders in there, and one of the folders will be the package that you just installed. you should never modify that code inside the node modules folder, because what happens is whenever the package gets updated, it's going to overwrite any code that you changed with the new code with the new update. So you never want to modify code in node modules. But if you take out the require, you wouldn't get that error module not found anymore. But then you wouldn't be able to use the package in your code. So the require is definitely a required thing. Latonia, I'm glad you figured out the opacity. That's I'm glad that you're practicing that debugging. I don't want any of you to think that, over time I'm just going to be a master and I'm not going to need to debug anymore, right? You guys see how quickly I write code, and I debug with you guys all the time, right? This is just a practice of programming and figuring that out. Debugging never goes away. The good news is you just get faster at knowing where to debug or being more comfortable with your debugging tools, right? So really in those error messages, I know the first line you read it and you go, all right, I understand the error message, but that stack trace, when you get really comfortable with reading them, you can actually start pulling out information on them, right? So that's why I push back a lot of times and I say, okay, module not found, but what else is the error? What is that stack trace? Because the first line of it may be giving you a clue, even though it's all file paths and colons and numbers and all of that stuff. The computer is trying to help you and saying, here's this generic error that we're running into, but here's where we're running into it. And sometimes where the error is actually more helpful than the error message itself. So definitely not being afraid of that stack trace or trying to dive into those a little bit more. And if you get stuck, or, if I'm debugging in the middle of class and you're like, whoa, you just made a jump there. How did you figure that out? How did you know to go over there? Definitely pump the brakes and stop me and be like, I'm lost. You debugged a little too quickly there. And I can go back and try and connect some parallels. At this point in the program, we're running out of new full stack material, and it becomes, all right, let's focus on the wiring, let's focus on fixing things, let's get it all working. So debugging practice is definitely a good thing to cover. Kyle, you asked a good question about testing. Should you run your code on a PC before deploying? You should test in different browsers, especially if you're focusing on a front-end project. Make sure it is working in Safari, Firefox, and Chrome, which are the three major rendering engines and the three major browsers. You used to have to test on Internet Explorer. Microsoft has fortunately killed that off. So unless you have some legacy clients like hospitals who can't update to past Internet Explorer, or you're working in some security sector where they still use Internet Explorer, you should test on that if you know your clients will be using it. And then Internet Explorer has now been replaced with Edge. And as of a year or two ago, Microsoft announced they were going to be using Chrome's engine under the hood to power Edge. So doing cross-browser testing is important. Testing on multiple screen sizes is important. I am notorious for making my entire web page, loading it on my phone, and realizing what a horrible mistake I made and how I should have started with my phone and then created it for the desktop and not the other way around. So it is definitely important to test your code. The operating system differences are becoming less and less important now, which is great. But there are still differences between browsers, and so it's still recommended to test across different ones. And there are a lot of tools. Cross-browser-testing.com is the big one, where you can go on a web page and just pick different browsers, and it will actually show you that browser, and you can test in it, so you don't even have to have all of them installed.
Wait, Max, what's the name of that page?
Cross-browser-testing.com.
Thank you.
I'll drop a link to it in the Zoom chat. This is one. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to send that to the direct message. There you go. That was one of them. And the other popular one is Browser Stack. These tools are not free. Some of them have pretty high pricing. In general, you don't need to worry too much about cross-browser testing. But thinking about responsive design, definitely an important thing to think about. And your users will let you know when you're building an app and you know, all of a sudden you're getting all these reports of this feature doesn't work. And you're like, well, it's working for everyone else. Like, I don't understand what your problem is. And so you'll start screen sharing with them, or, you know, trying to get more information from the user. And then you get this, you know, you get more information. You go, oh, you're using Internet Explorer 11. That came out not in the past decade. You know, that's 10 years old. And so sometimes you've got to work with clients on, like, you probably need to update your browser, or this is going to take longer for me to fix in the code than it would be for you to update. And I'm sure it's causing all kinds of other problems as well if you're using a browser that old. You do run into that on phones as well. People haven't updated their phone's operating system in like 5 years. And so you go to use something like GPS location or audio recording in a web app, and it's just not supported. And so you do have to check a little bit on compatibility. There is a great website called caniuse.com. And I will share my screen for this one. So this is caniuse.com. And basically, here are all of these features. And so if you click into Flexbox, it will tell you what version supports Flexbox. So they're saying IE 6 to 9 does not support Flexbox. But then there is also some information in here. So if you like hover over something, it will tell you that see where it says usage global 1.72%. That's saying that of all the internet traffic in the world, 1.72% of the internet traffic comes from Safari on version 14.1. Yes, Brandy, I may have covered this in week 1, or maybe in module 2. I wouldn't be surprised if Caitlin covered this as well. But you can get some interesting information on here, like 19% of the internet traffic globally uses the latest version of Chrome, which is version 91. And 92 through 94 aren't officially released yet, and that's why they only have 0.05%. So when you look up here at the numbers up at the top, you can start looking here and going, all right, well, 99.67% of the world supports Flexbox, so probably pretty safe for me to use it. Now, if you go in here and do something like OGG is an audio format that is kind of newer than MP3. It's open source, so you don't have to license it. But you can see in here that it only has 81% of global browser usage. And then on things like Safari on iOS, that accounts for 7% of the global internet traffic, right? 7% of the world uses an iPhone or Safari on their iPhone or iPad to browse the internet, and it's not supported on Safari. So that's something to consider is, all right, maybe I should check this and make sure these features are available before I go ahead and use it. Something like the OGG video format is only 36%. So that's when you start realizing, oh, just because it's working in Chrome doesn't mean that it's going to work in Internet Explorer or Safari or a couple of the others. So really, really awesome site to see if it's safe to use some features in your HTML or CSS. Any other questions? Only 6:28. We're 2 minutes ahead of our normal Monday schedule here. All right. If not, we're going to jump right into the deep end. Going once, going twice. Okay. Why Zoom? I shared a different screen and it's not. Come on. You can do it. Go over there. Okay, I think I'm good. You guys can see 2 panes in VS Code, right? Cool. All right, so jumping right into it. On my left side, I've got my front end React code open. And on my right side, I have all the code that we left off on Thursday. If you do not have this code, if you are behind, all of this is up to date in module 7, week 2, day 3 of the classroom repo. That link is also in assignment number 58, I believe. Yes, 58. So if you need that, the link to that, you can grab that from there. Again, classroom Google the classroom Git repo, module 7, week 2, day 3, both the chat front end and the chat back end. You can copy those out into your My Code folder, and then make sure you run npm after you copy them, because the Git repo does not have node modules and everything installed in it. Okay, so let's get things fired up here. I am going to npx nodemon server.js, and npx, oh, I'm not in my, I got a ls and cd into my appliance backend in the wrong folder in my terminal. And then npx nodemon server.js. And my database was already running in the background. If you get an eknr review or any other kind of error, it may be that your Postgres is not running. So if you hit Command Space and go into your Postgres app, you should just click this start button here, and then you can minimize it if it was not already running. If it was running, you don't have to stop it and restart it. It's good to leave running. Okay, so that's up and running. Now I'm going to come over here, and in my front end, I'm going to pop open a terminal, and I am going to npm start. And see which monitor that pops up on. This one. Okay, so we have our login screen over here, and I'm gonna log in, and I get this lovely customer screen that we created on Thursday with my table and my cheater emoji icons that are nice and showing up, and my whole add a customer. So we're doing pretty good here. And I'm going to just type in ABC and hit add customer, and it disappears. So if you can think all the way back to Thursday and where we left off, what do you think the next step is? Got to wire up the input. But before we wire up the input, Susan, we do have to save the info somewhere. So in order to save the info somewhere, we want to go to our customer model and make sure that that is up to date. So I'm going to pop open customer.js, and I've got all of these fields in here. All right, that's great. But you know what? It's been a minute since we've worked in this. I'm not sure if this is actually running. Thursday was a long time ago. I was bad and didn't leave myself any notes. How can I prove that this model is working and we're good to start using it? We can test in Beekeeper. So I'm going to pop open Beekeeper Studio. I am going to come over here and connect in. I have a recent connection to my appliances database, so I'm going to just use that. If you didn't, you could pick Postgres from that dropdown, and all we need to do is type in appliances as our database. We're going to go ahead and hit connect, jump in, and I have all of my fields there. They're showing up as the right data types. Ariel, because I know you're listening, you will see that they are varchars in the database. So that is what we wanted. That is good. I broke my rule, and I think I used varchar in my ERD. I should have used string because I was setting them up in Sequelize, but Sequelize did that magic for me under the hood, and it mapped it out to a varchar. Okay, so everything's great. Let me double click on that table, and I've got Testy McTesterson showing up. Okay, well, I come over here, and yeah, I've got Testy McTesterson showing up, but he's not coming from my database. He's hard-coded in there. So before we even do our input and wire up our input, what is the other thing we should probably do first before we do our create operation? Comes after create in our standard CRUD operation. Got to read or get the data, either way. We are going to read the data from the database. We're going to use a get HTTP method to get that information, and then we're going to use a .find to get that information from the database. Okay, so I'm going to come over to my server.js, and in here, I actually already wrote up my server.get customers. So this is great. We're actually a step ahead, further than where I thought we were. But from Thursday, we did our server.get. This is telling Express, hey, make a new route for us, an ROUTE, at the customer's endpoint. And we're going to do an async rec res. Why do we need the async? We're not to stop the flow, but what in particular, what flow do we need? What's making this different? Why do we have an async here, but not an async up here? Because we're connecting to the server. What server? The database, exactly. So what's happening here is we use this await keyword, and we're basically saying, hey, hold up, don't continue running this line of code until the database has given us this data back. Customer.findAll under the hood is using a promise. That means that it's going to execute that code asynchronously. And we're like, asynchronous code is great because it lets us do other things while this is running. But in this case, we don't want it to do other things. We want the data to come back from the database. We want to wait for that data before we res.send anything back. So we do our rec and res as always. Our rec is our request, the data coming in. Our res is our response, what we're going to be sending back. And we res.send, and we use an object. So it's going to send some JSON back for us automatically. We're going to send it back in the customer's object, and we are going to wait for the database to find all the customers. Okay. All of that's great. Any questions on that? All right, let's use it. So I'm going to switch back. I've got first name, last name, phone, and address showing up. Okay, all of that's great. I'm going to go back over to my front end page, and I'm going to open up my customers.js. Now that I'm in here, I would like some data to load when this component first loads. What method do we use so we can load data when this component loads for the first time? Use effect. You got it, Mel. So before we can use our use effect, we have to import our use effect from React. Now that we're using the use effect, or we're importing it, we can use effect, drop in a curly brace in there, which is great, but we also need to use another parameter with those square brackets. What do those square brackets tell React? They are the dependencies, Brandy. Yes, that is what they are called, but what's the point of them? What would happen if we didn't? What happens if we just left those out? To load once, exactly. So, and Kyle, to your point, the dependencies are what controls when the code in our use effect is going to run. So if we didn't put this in here, literally every time we type a letter into any of our form components, it would rerun our API call in the background. So we don't want that. We are basically saying, hey, because this is an empty array in here, only run that code once. Only load it when the component first is loading in. Okay, so I'm in here, and I am actually going to create an asynchronous function because I know I'm going to be doing something asynchronously in here. Now, you may say, Max, why can't you just throw an async right here? Well, I'll tell you why. If I throw an async in there, React all of a sudden yells at me, and it says, effect callbacks are synchronous to prevent race conditions. Race conditions means too many things are going to be happening at the same time, and they are going to cause other things to rerun that shouldn't be rerunning. So it's saying put the asynchronous function inside our async. So it's saying async function fetch data, and then it calls our fetch data down here. Well, I kind of cheated. I made an anonymous async function, and then I said, just run it at the end once you've created it. So that's a little shorthand in there. If this code makes more sense to you, you're welcome to do it. But the important thing is we don't do our async right out of the gate. Instead, we create our own async function that we're going to use in here. Okay, what method do we use in our use effect to retrieve some data from our API? Well, there are multiple answers here, but what have we used with me in particular? Our fetch. Yep, we are going to say fetch. And where do we want to fetch? We want to fetch from HTTP localhost. I'm going to pop over to my backend code, which is telling me that it is running on 3001. So I'm going to come back to my front end code and say 3001. And the route that we want to use is customers. And fetch is like, that's great. What other things do you need me to send when I'm fetching that data? So I'm going to say on this one that the method is just a get method. And that's all we need, right? We're not sending any route parameters. We're not sending anything in the headers or the body of the request. We can't send anything in the body of the request. It's a get, not a post. Okay, so what we're going to say is our const response is coming into our fetch, but we want to await that data being fetched before we do anything with the response. Then we want to say, hey, our data is going to equal our response.json. We're saying parse out the JSON, and in here, we're also going to do an await, because that JSON could be, theoretically, could be a gigabyte big, and it could take a long time to parse through that JSON and make it into a JavaScript object for us. So we have to do another await here. Now, if you like .then, if .then makes more sense to you and you like callback hell, by all means, go for .then. You do not have to use the awaits here. Okay, and after all of that, I'm just going to console log my data because we just wrote a lot of code and I want proof that this is all working. So no errors in my terminal, no errors in my backend terminal. So I'm going to go to my front end. Testy's still hanging out up here. There are two of them though, so I know my data isn't loading in there yet. That's all right. We haven't told React how to do that. We're going to go into our inspect and pop into our console, and it is yelling at me that I use class instead of class name. We'll fix that in a minute. But here I've got my object has my customers, and my customers has everything that's in my database, and I can pop that open and see all the different fields. Okay, that's great. Now, these are going to bother me. So I apparently used class instead of class name somewhere. So I'm going to use my global search. I'm going to do a search for class. And right in this code, if I double click on it, it will jump me right there. And it will tell me I was a bad boy and use class instead of class name. So I'm going to fix that. That's all the way down on our add customer. It's line 200 for me. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top. I got my fetch working. I'm going to go back into Chrome. I'm going to clear my console and refresh the page. and it's yelling at me for other things as well. So it's saying I used for instead of HTML4. So I'm going to do a search for for, and all of this is refactoring. Okay, I used it in a lot of places. So for is completely valid HTML, but React does not like the word for, because it could in React, it could overwrite a for loop that we are using, right? Just like class could overwrite a JavaScript class object. Same with for, right? We want to be able to use for loops in our own React code. So because I use it in so many places, I'm actually going to use the global find and replace tool. And I'm going to say for equals, replace it with HTML for equals, and replace across all 10. The replace all button is right here. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to refresh. And now I'm down to just one thing. And it is saying use the default value or value props on select instead of using the property selected on option. Okay, what I did is I said I want New York to default to my state, right? Most of my customers are coming in, and they're coming into the in the state of New York. So I can change that here, but React is cranky, and it went, I don't like the way you did that. Do it a different way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my select, and I'm going to find New York and take out my option selected. And then I'm going to scroll back up to the top, and on my select, I'm going to say default value is equal to New York. No errors in my console. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to refresh. And I've got just down to my customers. Now, I don't let those warnings or those errors bug me in the console until I go to commit. And my general rule of thumb is don't commit until you've got all of the warnings and errors cleaned out of both your terminal running your React server for you, but also in your JavaScript console. And you know what? It's also best practice to remove any console.logs, because you don't really want to expose data to the end user. Console.log is for you to debug. It isn't for the end user to start snooping around in the console and say, hey, what's going on there? Oh, look, I can get some information like, oh, they're using a SQL database because the IDs are numbers instead of the IDs being a string. So that's something that you want to keep in mind, is we should probably clean this up. But you know what? We're still working on this feature. We're not committing anything yet. It's okay to leave a console log in. Okay, so want to do one more step, maybe two more steps, and then we'll take a break, make sure you guys are caught up, and then take our 7 o'clock break as well. All right, so we've got our data, and it's rocking and rolling right here. Where do I need to put that data so I can use it in my render for the return? Into the state. All right, well, if we're going to use the state, we might as well use our state. So I'm going to say const customers, and set customers is equal to use state null. Because there aren't going to be any customers loaded until we do our data here. Okay, now before I start even putting data into that, I want to make sure this shows up right. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to comment out my table rows, and I'm going to use a ternary operator and get a little fancy. And I'm going to say, if we have our customers do a table row and a TD for table data, and say customers info goes here. Otherwise, still make a table row with some table data. Oops, with some table data that says loading ... And it's mad at me because I have two closing TDs. I'm going to save that. So what I said is if our customers exist, we're going to do stuff with that table data. But if it doesn't exist, we're probably still making that API call. It's still probably loading. So if I pop back over to Chrome, we now have this loading ... So it's not, you know, the user's not like, oh my God, where did all my customers go? They're like, oh, my customers are loading, right? You want to show them some loading screen instead of just giving them a blank screen. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my front end code, and I am going to set my data, set my customers from my data.customers. Okay, that's in my state. Now I can come over here. Now I got my customers info goes here. So something's loading. Now I'm going to come back down here, and we have multiple customers, right? That's an S. Because we have multiple customers, what kind of data type are we using to store all of that customer information? Not an object. Well, we technically are using an object, but all of those objects are stored together in an array, and that array is holding multiple objects that are storing the user keys that have the user values in them. Okay, so because we are using an array, what do we need to do here? What function do we use in React to create something? We need to do our map, exactly. So we're going to say customers.map, and because we're mapping over them, now we get access to our individual customer. Okay, that's all cool and stuff, but like, I feel like we're doing too much. So I'm just gonna console log out our customer, and then I'm gonna say return, and I'm just gonna return our table row to get started. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna refresh, and it's yelling at me because I didn't use a key property. But would you look at this, line 48, okay, line 48, that's where we're at, that's good. We have access to this object that's got all of this information. Well, and hey, it's even yelling at me about a key, but I bet that this customer ID would be a pretty good key to use. And oh, look, I've got first name and last name here. That shows up in phone and address. Well, let's use that. All right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, let's throw our key on it first before we forget. So I'm going to say my key is equal to my customer.customer ID. And then I'm going to have my TD. And what's my first TD? My first data point is my first name. So I can just say customer.first name. And if we keep this party going, I've got my customer.last name. And all right, now I've got my phone number. So we'll do our TD customer.phone, but I don't remember what it was called. So I'm going to save here. I'm going to pop back over here. My phone number isn't showing up. And if we look in our object, it's because the key that we used was phone number, not just phone. And Latonia, to your point, no standard there. Sometimes it's called phone in the database. Sometimes it's called phone number in the database. Sometimes it's called phone num. No standard on that, unfortunately. Okay, now my phone number's showing up, but we run into this problem with the address. Of our address is split out. We've got address 1, address 2, city, and state should be down here somewhere. All right, that makes sense. We don't want to change that in the database because if we want to just say, show me all of my customers in the state of New York, we want that New York field to stay separate. So keeping it separate in the database makes sense, but we don't want to overwhelm this table and do column after column after column, because you know what? We tested that in our mockups and our mockups didn't do that. We wanted to combine that all into one field. So what we are going to do is we do our TD like normal, but there's nothing saying we can't combine some of this information. So what we're going to do is we're going to say customer.address1, and we're going to put a comma, and a space and do our customer.address to, and then a comma and our customer.city, a comma and a space and our customer.state, and wrap it up with our customer.zip code. Did I get that right? Customer.zip code. Yep. And so there's Tessie McTesterson with a phone number and his address showing up. Now, there's one thing we didn't do, and that is, turns out we've got our icons down here for our edit and delete. So I'm just going to steal them and drop them right into that last table data. Come over here, and I've got my edit showing up. So to prove all of this is working, I'm going to go to my Beekeeper Studio, and I am going to say, insert into customers, and the ones we're going to target is first name, last name, phone number, address 1, address 2, city, state, zip code. And I'm going to add the values, and I'm going to say address. Did I use that already? Yes, I did. 456 First Street. I think that's everything. Gonna run. And it's mad at me because I didn't put these in backticks for the column names, I think. Just make my window bigger, that would probably be helpful. And just put these onto some new lines so we can see them easier. Okay, let's run that. All right, fine, be a pain. Can I do a find and replace? No, I can't. All right, let me try single quotes and see if that makes it happy. If not, I am showing that I am actually a terrible SQL author and do everything in Sequelize normally. Am I missing something obvious? Insert into my column list. Syntax error. Is it not like this being on a new line? Shouldn't be it. I don't think double quotes are right either.
Hey, Max, would it matter if you had a semicolon or not at the end of that second paren?
No, the semicolon has to go at the end because that's the end of the
Very well.
statement.
Okay.
Okay, it did want it in double quotes, I guess. And then it just wants created at and updated at. And we can do that at now and now. Aha. Okay, so it finally ran. I will copy and paste this into the channel so you don't have to suffer through what I just did. Okay, so now if I come back over to my Chrome, into my React app, not here yet, but when I refresh the page, boom, data was in the database. Now it's showing up here. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, going to start a poll. Locked out of polling because Jason signed in with the Hack Upstate account. I'm going to be right back. And then when I come back, work on trying to get your information in the back end showing up on the front end. So I'll share my front end code. And once we get a majority of people running in the poll, we'll take our break, but I don't want to overlap our break with working on the code. So we will take a break in a couple minutes, but we want to get our data showing up in the front end first. If you are following along tonight, I will be back in 30 seconds. "30 seconds or less." Should have had a guarantee on that. Kyle, you asked a question, can we just use a \n in here? We could, but because we're in HTML, we could actually just put in a line break. And that would move my zip code down for me. Or theoretically, we should also be able to, if we put this in curly braces and do our \n. Oh, I thought that would work.
You're not sharing. Did you mean to be?
Oh,
Sorry.
no, thank you. Appreciate it.
I didn't mean to be a pain.
What did work is when I just put a line break in here, it moved my zip code down to the next line. But I'm kind of surprised. I wonder, do I need a double \n? Nope. I don't know why that isn't working. Can I get fancy and like... I don't think that's going to work either. Don't know what to tell you there. I would just use the line break. I'm kind of surprised that isn't showing up because \n normally is the... Wonder, does it need an RN? Nope. It's just ignoring that entirely. I don't know what to tell you there. Other than use the line break instead. Got 5 poll votes in. 4 people so far of a no, but keep going. I'm happy to slow down. We want to make sure we're understanding all of this. And so happy to slow down, happy to let you keep up pace, or if you've got feedback for me and you want to keep it anonymous, send it to Karen and Karen can relay it over to me of something you might not be clear on, something you need recovered.
I have kind of a random question.
Yep.
Are you able to turn off whatever that is that's helping you that you seldom use? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like when you're writing in the code and then it pops up that big box and it covers everything so that we can't continue to follow along. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I unfortunately know what you're talking about, but also have no idea what it's called, which means it's going to be hard to turn off. But let's do a search for autocomplete and see if I can. Yeah, let's see if that does it. That would probably be too easy, but we will see if it does or not next time I type code.
Thank you. I hate to ask in case you want it on there. It's just that I know that's where I had to just sit
All
back.
good.
I couldn't see. Thanks.
Got 7 votes in. I'm gonna wait for one more and then I'll let you guys go on break.
Could I have you look at mine and then tell me if it's my code or if it's something else?
It's always you, Susan.
Well, I thought
Just
I followed
kidding.
you along right, and then I got this error. It says node modules and prototype of undefined. I don't know if it's because I deleted the thing to send you.
Yeah,
other
go ahead
day.
and screen share.
Okay.
Okay, can I get prototype of undefined? Interesting. Let's take control. If you can just
approve. Yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
Thank you. It's weird that it's trying to use Express in our React front end. That's the first thing I see in this long stack trace, but everything else that I see is like we're deep into this rabbit hole of Webpack and things working under the hood. So go ahead and is this your code?
Yeah. I have them both open in the same window, but that was fine last week. I didn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, and it was working for a split second. Oh, but now we've got a different error here, which is interesting. I just saved your customers and it changed. I'm gonna go over here and just ls. Yeah, that's all right. npx nodemon server.js. Customers, let me just look in your server. Server is right. Okay. And customers, res sending, you've got your async, your customer, everything looks right there. Go up to your use effect. Has your async, your anonymous, your local host, async await console data. Everything looks right there. And now we're back to that other error.
Does this have something to do with deleting the node module to send you the files and then putting it back in?
No, you've got node modules in both your front end and back end. I'm gonna just comment this out and we'll see if we can get it working. And if we can, we'll start commenting things back in.
That's weird. It was working before. I mean, when I opened it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, this is definitely a weird one. The request of a dependency is an expression. All right, well, let's try that theory. Let's rmrf your node modules, which is going to delete the whole folder from your front end, and then npm install. You know what it probably is? Some weird import that you have somewhere that's causing it to pull in, import response from Express. We don't have Express. This is the front end. And you know what happens? That autocomplete that Latonia just had me turn off, it probably, when you typed in response.json, it was like, oh, I'll help, and pulled in response from Express. But response shouldn't be coming from Express. So if we take that out, oh, come on, and restart your server, now this should load. Oh, come on, I just fixed that. I didn't save it though. Now this loads. And if we turn this back on, it is going to say, hey, everything's great, but response is not defined. Well, it's not defined because we didn't say, hey, when you do that fetch, store it in this thing called response and await for it to get in there. And now if we come over here and take a look. No, we got a different error. Well, we're making progress. Localhost, customers, get, data response, console log the data, all of that's right. Get your customers, customer, find all customer. All right, so let's, Latonia, to your point, use our debugging tools to go to the network tab and pop open our customers. Go to, make sure there isn't another, oh, customers up here. Response. No, I think we actually want this customers. So that's sending me back some HTML and stuff, which makes me think that our GET request is happening to port 3000. What's 3000? 3000 is our front end.
Front, yeah.
So we want to go to 3001. So we pop back over here. We go to our console. Oh, customers. So you should be good to go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Max.
Yep.
It's Latonia. So I'm thoroughly confused. I'm trying to update my code. I cannot figure out where I'm putting this loading that you added in that other code. And part of it's my fault because I went in and like styled mine. So it doesn't look like yours. Are you able to help me?
Yep. Go ahead and share your screen. And we did hit the 8 vote threshold. So I will say, let's take a break and be back here at 7:35, 20-minute break. So I'll see you guys at 7:35. And if you want to stick around, you're welcome to. So what we did is in your table body, what we did is a ternary operator right after the table body. And we said if customers exist, so we do our curly brace because we're doing this in JavaScript, and we say customers.
With a capital or lowercase?
Lowercase. Did you already set up your state?
Yes, the state is, yep.
Perfect. So yeah, then we do a question mark and a TR and a TD in a tag.
TR.
Yep. And then a TD in there.
TD.
And then we are going to say customers goes here. Or data goes here, or some placeholder.
Write it in. Oh, it's not.
Yep.
Customers here. Okay.
And then we have to finish out our ternary operator. So before the curly brace, yep, we're going to do our colon, another TD, TR.
TD.
I'm sorry, TR, TD.
Okay. TR. TD. Okay.
And then we're going to say loading ...
Okay. Okay.
So before we go any further, we want to test that in the browser.
Okay. So I felt like you commented stuff out.
Oh, I commented out your TRs that already are in there.
So 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
Okay. And then, okay, so now am I doing a console log or am I going somewhere?
Nope. We just want to test to make sure the word loading is showing up.
Okay. Hold on, let's see it. Sliver in here.
So you have customers here, but oh, there you go. It is working.
So is that supposed to be there?
Yes, because you're already setting in your customers. So if you refresh the page, you'll see that it says loading for a split second, and then it changes to customers here.
Okay, but that's what yours is doing? Everybody else is doing that? Or
mine is actually showing up the customer data because I replaced customers here with the .map function.
Okay.
So you've got one more step to go until you're caught up with me.
Okay. And is that in here somewhere? Or?
Yeah, keep going, keep going. Oh, no, it's above that. Sorry, it's above the form.
Okay.
It is that return customers colon. Yeah, you got it all in there.
Return to the...
You see where my loading is at the bottom?
Yes.
That should give you a relative kind of place marker.
Okay. Okay, let me see if I can figure that out. Oh, it's that whole section. Yeah, I should be able to. Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions before I go on break? Okay, doke. See you guys at 7:35.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's my internet. I'm assuming you said yes.
I did.
You always do.
Did you all you heard was is?
Looks like I missed a T. I might have an opening T or I'm not supposed to have, or a closing T. 93. T. Well, it looks like
Ooh, God. Normally it
something
jumps out at me and I'm like,
yeah, this.
it's something around your ternary is coming like too soon. Hold on, let me I might just have to click through it.
Okay. And I just pasted that back in just to not lose it, but
yeah, so I'm gonna just comment that out so we know that's not causing problems. So this closing, this is closing your map all the way up here. And so all you should need is that there. Nope. No, you have a closing parenthesis there. And then that.
and then
And
an open.
Opening one.
Yeah.
And then get rid of that.
Okay. So then where does the customers go?
The customers here you don't need anymore. So I'm going to take all of this out because the data is showing up for the customer instead.
And 100. Okay. And 100 too, right? I delete 100.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Or is that what you just put in? I'm sorry.
Nope. It's just on a.
No, you just put this in, right? So I can delete this.
Just be careful. It's gonna do something. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Let me save before something is lost. Okay.
And then in your browser, the customer data should actually be showing up from the database.
Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you, Max.
No problem.
I'll try to talk less, I promise.
Oh, you're good.
Hi, Max.
Yep.
I have an odd question.
I have an odd answer then.
When setting up the database, like if we were working freelance, are we in charge of the database on like handoff? Like how do we separate that if there's a separation from our database and like what we hand to the customer?
Yeah, that kind of gets into all of the deployment stuff of like how do you deploy it, and you want to be careful when you're setting up servers or hosting, like making sure that the client is paying for the hosting. Sometimes you do that as like you put it on your credit card or debit card, and the client pays, like reimburses you. Basically, you charge the client for it, or you get the client's information and you set up the hosting on their credit card. So it can go either way. When you do your deploys, you do want to make sure that you are setting it up so each client has their own database or their own hosting. You don't want to create like one database server and like host all of their websites for them, because then you get into this territory of like one client could have a really busy website that takes all of your other clients' websites down. So you want to get into something that's called reseller hosting, which is particularly for website hosting and being able to resell that hosting to your clients. But if you're working more on the app level and less on a website level, you then get into a different territory of deploying and managing those deploys, making sure you have access to the servers, all of that kind of stuff. So that will be coming up in the next, I think it's the module after next with Nathan. of DevOps and deploying and managing all of that stuff as well. But the summarized answer of that is you definitely need to make sure that you're keeping clients separate, but you want to do that at the hosting level or at the server level.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, you know how we did a create database for the appliances app, and then we did a separate create database for the messaging app or whatever it is, that same kind of principle, except that every client would get their own hosting account, and then it's up to the host to make sure that data stays separate and that people don't get access to other ones. But a very common mistake to make in the beginning when you're doing consulting work is you think, oh, I'll just buy web hosting and put all of my clients on my web hosting. And then you get a client yelling at you going, I want access to my own website. And now you can't easily hand over the username and password because it's got all of your clients' websites on it. And so that's when you want to use something like reseller hosting, which will allow you to create a separate account for each one of your clients while still being able to access them all yourself. And it's more expensive to do that for sure. But the goal is that, you know, you get enough clients where you actually start making money by reselling the hosting. I've confused my camera and now it won't focus. There we go. No, Brandy, definitely not an odd question. A very common thing to get into when you're setting up your business.
Hey, Max.
Yes.
This is another random question. I'm just curious. So I was trying to catch up and I didn't see how you transformed the list from the written out states so quickly to just the abbreviations.
Yeah, I cheated on that and did it while you were on break.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
How?
I did that on Thursday.
Oh.
I would just copy and paste that from the Slack channel. If you find the long list of states.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the things are in here. If you just copy all of those and paste it on top of where you have all of your options, it will change it to all the state abbreviations.
Okay, thanks. I did do it by hand all the way down to Hawaii. Then I copied the rest. And I was like, I just wonder what trick he did. So
yeah, unfortunately, no trick there. I just found it on the web and switched it over.
okay.
I did that, and I did one other thing before I put the code in GitHub, and I was wondering if you guys were gonna call me out on it. And I can't even remember what it was. Anyway, doesn't matter.
So I've got my code working, but had another question about something from, or an error I'm getting actually because of, I did something a little differently than you did in the,
Okay.
Yeah, I'll try to share my screen here. So where you corrected the error with, I'll say I'm not looking at the screen, it's the thing that you had with the, like here with the what did it want, the value, or it didn't like the value or something like that. I have to go back to the console thing here.
Yeah,
Anyway,
didn't like
because I have this, like, I was trying to do something where I was like getting like an empty value to show up when that started, or like a grayed out value or something like that.
Yep.
I wasn't sure what I need to change about this to get to fix the other.
You want to take that selected keyword out.
Okay.
And then
Disabling it.
and that should fix the warning in the console or in the terminal.
Okay. So we should try that. I've got this all. Can't really read this the way I've got it now. Here we go. That'll be better.
And then go ahead and refresh the page, which will clear out your console, and you're good to go.
Oh, I am. Okay. That was pretty simple.
All right. People should be getting back. Does anyone have an error that they want to screen share through? Anyone stuck? Okie doke. We're going to keep going then. And this poll, in case it's in anyone's way. Okay, so we've got our customers showing up. They're in here. That's all great. Now we need to do one more thing. We need to get our add a customer wired up as well. Okay, so
Screen share.
Okay, so I'm going to take out my customer, my console log customer, just because we've got the data showing up. We don't want to forget about that. So I'm going to clear that out. I'm going to come down here and I've got this giant form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on submit, I'm going to say add customer, and I'm going to come up to outside of my return, and I'm going to say add customer, and that is going to have an event. And we are going to console log out. And how do we access our data in the form? Does anyone remember? Without using state, there's a trick we can use to pull out that on submit form data. We can use an on change, Shaw, but if we use an on change, we have to get all of that data into the state. And we probably don't want to put every individual thing in the state. That's one way of doing it. We don't need to use a prop because it's all in the same component. There is a trick way of accessing that form data. I guess we can do it the state way. I'm trying to remember, I saw Joey do it with access to form data, and it was so much quicker. Let me just take a look here. I'm gonna console log out my event.target, and let's just see what that does. So I'm gonna come over here, add customers not defined. Whoa, didn't mean to open that. Because probably spelled it wrong. Add customers on my on submit in my form. Const add customer. Fresh. Okay, that got rid of the error. I'm going to do ABC and I'm going to hit add customer, and it reloaded on me. This one, I know why I did that. That is because I forgot my event.prevent default. We're saying, hey, we're going to take care of the form submission. You don't have to worry about that. I'm going to do an ABC. I hit add customer, and now I get my form, and it's got all of my rows in it. So I am going to show you what I'm doing. I did a JavaScript. I did a search for React uncontrolled. When we say uncontrolled, we mean that we're not putting it in state. We're not controlling what the value and what the on change is doing. So whenever we have an input that's not linked up to the state, it is an uncontrolled input. And so I want to see, to write an uncontrolled input, instead of writing an event handler for every state, you can use a ref to get the form values out of the DOM. So we do a ref. I still thought there was a quicker way of doing it. Won't let me do, what happens if I come down here and I do an ID on my input? I have it there. HTML4 ID first name. It's not going to let me do dot first name, is it? That would be too easy, right? Add customer. Oh, so look at that. It gave me my first name. We're on to something here. I think I'm going to get away with this. What happens if I grab the value? Add customer. Hey, ABC, would you look at that? We can cheat a little bit. Okay, so what we did is we did our event.target, and that event target is happening on our form itself. But within our form, we have access to first name. Where is first name coming from? Well, first name is coming from our form, but it has an ID of first name. So what we're doing when we say dot first name on our event target is using our DOM to pull our input tag. And now that we've got our input tag, we can use dot value and get out the value of that in the form. So it's kind of a cheat, because we're not using state, and React wants us to put all of that data in state, but then we've got to create an on change for everything, and we've got to do a use state for all of that form data. That's a lot to do there. So we're cheating a little bit, and we're just going to grab our event target, which is our entire form, and then from our form, we can grab our first name and our value. Okay, so I'm going to start loading this up, and I'm going to say first name is equal to that. I'm going to say const last name is equal to, and I'm just going to keep on copying and pasting here as we go down. And then I'm going to keep going. Const address 1 is equal to address 1. Wouldn't it have been smart of me to pick something that didn't have so much data in it? Yes, it would. But we will carry on anyway.
I have a question.
Shoot.
So, with the variable names or whatever, like, do you think we can like use a loop or something like that, and then like, I guess, for example, like use brackets for, I mean, not brackets, but the straight braces? Or maybe
Yeah, you could try it.
then
I'm
like-
not sure if it's gonna work, but we could try it. We can do a for const like form field is equal to for of our event dot target, and let's just try in console.log our form field and see what comes out. So let me refresh, clear the browser, and do our add customer. And it yells at me and it says cannot read property value of undefined, but that's actually breaking up here. My state's a drop down, so that's going to be a little different. We'll come back to that one in a second. So let me clear and ABC and add customer. That does give me access to all of my inputs here. The problem is you would have to get out access to the ID. So you could maybe do form field ID and submit it. And that does give me everything. So Jahil, I think you're onto something. We can.
Yeah, I was thinking like ID dot actually I was experimenting with something like that before, so that's the reason why. But like I'm gonna look into my code so I can like actually explain what I meant.
Yeah, we should be able to do something like form data is going to be our form field dot ID, which is going to be equal to our form field dot value. Yeah. And then if we console log out our form data, and the only thing we want to add here is if there is a form field dot target form field dot ID. We want to make sure everything we're pulling out actually has an ID on it and save that. So form field is not defined on line 32. Form data. Oh, go away. I did not mean to do that. Form field. So if we do an ABC 1, 2, 3 and hit add customer, it does pull out everything for us. So that's a nice little trick and good thinking. And Mel, what you sent, that input field change, we would use that, but we would have to link that up to the state as well. So as soon as we do an input field change, we are attaching an event to it. And so we would have to store that on change event data somewhere. And that's when we would use state to do that, which there's nothing wrong with using state in that situation. This is actually a common downfall of React. So people going, I have a form field, I have to write a lot of code in order to be able to pull data out of that. You would think that would be a little easier. But I think what Jahil just came up with of kind of combining, oh, well, we've got access to the value. Why don't we just loop over all of that and create some variable called form data and dump all of that in there? So I'm actually going to comment that out because we've got all of the data that we want in here, except the state. And we'll solve that problem in 1 second. All right, so we've got all of our form data. Let's roll with it. How am I going to get that data up to the server?
Send.
I have to send it to the server, but how am I going to do that? What method or what package am I going to use?
No.
Same one that we use to get data from the server. We're going to send data to the server using
SQLize.
Nope. On the front end, what are we going to use? Not use effect. Use effect we use to pull the data in, and not use state. Use state is where we would store the form data, but we already kind of cheated the state and got all the data out that we needed. Use effect we did use up here because we wanted this to run the first time the component loads. We don't want to have our save happen the first time the component loads. We want the save to run on our add customer, our form submit. So what are we going to do down here to get the data back up to the server? Hint, the answer is in the use effect. We aren't actually using the use effect, but we're going to do something similar. We are actually going to just fetch again. And we're going to fetch to our localhost 3001 and go to our customers. But this time, we're going to use the post method. Well, why are we using the post method? Because we already have this lovely post method customers created for us that's going to take in our body and create it in the database. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, hey, heads up, you need to tell the server that the content type that we are sending up is going to be application JSON. And we are going to send up the body, and in our body is going to be all of our form data. And in addition to our form data, because actually I'll do that up here, our form data is lacking a little bit. It needs some help to get the state out. So for right now, we're just going to hard code it and say form data.state equals New York. We'll fix that in a minute. Okay. And then we are going to say, hey, what does our form data send back? It sends back all of our customers for us. So we're going to const the response and await for it. But we're okay. I'll keep going. Oh, yell at me in a second. Our const data is going to be our response await response.json, because that data is coming back as a string. We need to parse it into the JSON, and then we can set our customers to our data.customers. And so I am going to. Don't know what happened to my terminal. Okay, so I get a failed to compile and it's pointing me at my await. Okay, well, I'm gonna go find my await. My await's here. Well, that should be there. I need to wait for the data to come back. Oh, it's telling me that I can't use a reserved word await until I tell the computer, hey, I'm using asynchronous code here. So I'm going to drop that in. I got it compiled successfully. Come back over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in A, B, C, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, address 111, 222, Ithaca. Why not? I have no idea what Ithaca's zip code is. 10101. Okay, so I'm going to pull this down a little bit. I'm going to hit add customer. And I get a lovely access to fetch 3001 from origin 3000 has been blocked due to CORS. Okay, let's go back to our backend code. I do have CORS set up. Come back over here. Fail to fetch. Wonder if I'm going to just do a quick look in our database and see if it made it in. I don't think it did. Sometimes you get CORS errors that aren't actually caused by CORS. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but let's run this down a little bit and try that again. Okay, so we just got, when I sent that, you notice we got all of these errors in the terminal. I think this has thrown us off the scent. I don't think this is actually a CORS error. I think that there's something going on in our backend that's causing the problem. And it says unexpected token O at JSON position 1. That JSON is really telling me something. I think we did something wrong on the content type. I think the server isn't realizing that I'm sending it some JSON. So what I'm going to do is I think what it needs, we sent our form data, but our form data, is that JSON? It's not JSON, it's a JavaScript object. So what we need to do is turn it into JSON by stringifying it first. So now we're telling the server, hey, we're actually sending you some JSON. We're not sending you this object that can't go across the internet, but I'm telling you the content type coming in is JSON. So when it gets into the body parser, it will actually pull it out for us. So I'm going to come over here, going to hit add customer again. Not only did I not get an error, but oh, if you look at that, I got my address in the customers table. Okay, so one more thing that I want to do is I just want to clear out this form data, right? Once we add a customer, it shouldn't be in there. I am curious to see if this is where I'm going to pay the price for not using state. I'm wondering if I can get away with saying form field dot value is now going to be equal to nothing. So just say to hit add customer. And if you look at that, not only did it add the customer for me, it cleared everything out. All right, I will take it. We've got our customers. We still haven't done our edit or delete. I'm gonna come back to those if we have time, but I want to get onto our service orders and talk a little bit about how we can use our data relations to get that working. So I'm going to take a quick break. I will share this code in our code. Everything we have done on the front end and in our customers.js file. So we'll take a break and I will launch the poll. You know, a couple of you are following along, but I want to give everyone a chance to let it sink in. If you are not coding along with me, go into the pasted code channel and start just reading through that code. There's a single line of code that you don't understand not only what it's doing, but why we're using that line of code. You want to ask those questions now, either in chat or come off of mute, and I'll happily explain it. Later, fuckers. going to give you guys more time, but the state thing was bugging me. I couldn't figure out why state wasn't working in the drop down. Like that should be working. I know that should be working. Well, if you go down to our select down here, you see how all of our inputs have this lovely ID on them that we're using to store that all the information. Well, if we come down to our select has a class name and a default value, it has no ID. So all I need to do is add an ID onto it. And then when I come back up, I just need to clear out in my add customer method, the state equals NY. And now when I go in to my front end and set a state and just hit add customer, it does pull that state information in. And when I say state information, I literally mean the geographical state that they live in, not state as in React state. So the only things that I was missing, and I'll update the code in Slack to show that, was I had to add an ID onto the select tag.
I have a question about the form data looper. I just want to confirm something. So you put in the if form field.id because of the created it line in the database, so that it wouldn't include that. Is that why you did that?
No, that's a good question. Let's comment that out and just share my screen.
I was just trying to figure out what wouldn't have an ID in the database.
Yeah, so the state didn't, it's not about what's in the database, it's about what's in the DOM, because we're looping over what inputs are in the HTML. We're not looping over any data in the database yet.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. This is about data going in. This isn't about data coming out. And so initially I had my select field that didn't have an ID on it. And so I didn't want the state to come in empty. But now that I fixed that, let's just console log out all of our form fields .id and also the form field .value and just see what's in all of them. I commented out my API call here just in case. Oh, and my set customers, because if I don't want all of every time I submit the form for that to end up in my database. So it's a common thing to just turn off the call to the database. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to clear this out and hit add customer. And what do I get? I get 1, 4, 2, 3, 6, New York, 7. But there's this one line down here that does not have an ID or a value. So if we come over here to our front end code and look at what of all the things are in my form, well, here's my input. There's another input. We keep coming down, input, input, input. But all the way down here, there is another thing that is technically an input, and that is our button. And you'll notice our button does not have an ID on it. So we don't want to save our button into the database, which is why we just do that if statement up here that says, hey, just make sure it has an ID before we save it into the database, because the ID on the DOM that we're using in the HTML is what we are using to store into the right column into the database itself.
Okay, so is that just a standard thing you do with any loop when you're looping over stuff that's going to go into the database then? Honestly,
this is the first time I've used a loop over a form. I have always used state and pulled it out. This is the first time I've cheated. And I mean, you saw me, I was writing all of this out here. So this is a common thing to do, is to write out several lines of code to pull out the form data, whether it's coming from the form event itself or coming from your state and sending that in. So I think we happened to get lucky here. And then this was just quick thinking on my feet of, all right, something's coming in that doesn't have an ID. So let's just make sure only things that have IDs make it up to the database. So I'm just going to comment this back in. I'm pretty sure, by the way, that the thing that doesn't have the ID is the submit button. I'm not like 100% sure about that, but because buttons oftentimes will be an input type equals button, I'm thinking that that's why the data is in the form and why I'm getting an empty there. All right, got 8 votes in. How are we thinking? You guys want another minute or should we keep going? Give you guys 1 more minute, then we'll keep going. Again, if you're not coding along tonight, that's completely fine, but you want to make sure you have understanding of everything we're covering tonight. So read through the pasted code. Let me know if you guys have any questions on what we're using.
The next one's did and just giving a clean explanation.
Sorry, your internet cut out. Sorry, can you ask again?
Hello.
Okay, you're back now.
That's so embarrassing. Okay, so it's not like I'm not. Do you mind going through that last leg that you did again, just doing like a clean explanation of everything that happened from where Jahil made the suggestion to?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, great question. So pull this over here and just share. This one? This one. Okay. So I'm gonna pull my terminal kind of out of the way. All right. So first thing that we did is we came down here and we already had our form created, right? Our form had a bunch of inputs on them and we stuck IDs on all of them so we knew what kind of input we were getting back. And we got fancy and we used a select, and this time we were smart and put an ID on the select because I forgot to do that before. And then all the way down at the bottom, we have a button that says add customer. Okay, well, because it's a type submit, what that is going to do is it's going to go all the way up to my form tag, all the way up here at too far, all the way up here with my form, and we are using an on submit event. That on submit event is triggering my JavaScript add customer. So I'm going to command click, which will jump me up to add customer. And the first thing we do in add customer is we say, hey, this is going to be an asynchronous function. We're going to be doing some stuff on the web. We need access to asynchronous code, and pull in the event. What is the event? The event is the form being submitted. Okay, first thing we do is we prevent default. We don't want the default action of the form submission to refresh the page, which is a very common thing to do in Express. Don't refresh the page. That's the default event. Next, this is kind of the old school way of accessing form values, right? We can go into the target, which is the form, and from the form, we can pull out our first name input, and then we can get the value of it. But we got fancy, and we said, hey, create this object called form data, and we're going to shove all the form data in there once we loop over it. So do a for loop and go get our event target. Our target of the form submission was the form itself. So for of, loop over each one of them and stick each form field that you find into this variable called form field. So we had several form fields in our event target, and now we're getting access to each individual one. From there, we did a console log just so we could see what we're getting access to. We're getting access to the ID and the value in this case. So what we say is, hey, we only care about form fields that have an ID on them. In this case, our button didn't have an ID on it. So we were kind of like, well, it doesn't have an ID on it. We probably don't want any value from it. So just skip over it if it doesn't have an ID. From there, we say, go get the form field value. Go get what was actually typed into the form field and store it in this form data object. Okay, well, objects always have key and value pairs. This is clearly the value. What do we want to store as the key? That we're going to use the form field ID. So our object is going to look something, when it's done, something like this. It's going to say first name, and it's going to say ABC, and then last name, DEF, and then, you know, ... right? So what this loop is doing is it is creating this object for us. And this if statement is just saying, hey, if there's no ID here or here, don't add that to the object, just skip over it. Then the last thing we do in that loop is saying, after we got that data out for us, go ahead and clear out the value of the form, right? Clear the field. We already have the data. We're good to go. Then we come down and we do our fetch. We're fetching to 3001, which is our backend server, and we're using the customers route. Now, customers has actually two routes on it, one get method and one post method. So we need to tell fetch, hey, heads up, something's coming your way. So we're going to use a method post because we almost always use post to create something new in the database. And we have to tell it some headers are coming. The headers are what is telling Express, hey, use body parser to pull that data out as JSON. So we tell it the content type, what is the content type of our body is going to be application JSON. Great. Now that we've told the server, hey, body parser, this is JSON, we need to get our body together. Well, our body is going to be our form data that we just looped over here and set up here. So we're using the result of this loop down in our fetch, but the internet doesn't like sending objects, right? That's the whole point of JSON, is there's a standard object notation that we can use to send that data up. So we have to stringify it first because the internet really good at sending strings back and forth. So we turn our JavaScript object into a string by using our JavaScript object notation. That goes up to the server. Our backend does some stuff in the database. It uses a model. It sends back our customers. Well, that comes back as a string. So we have to tell it, hey, use the .json, which is actually coming from our fetch, to convert that JSON over for us. That is going to become some data, and our data is going to be an object that has customers in it. So we take that whole thing and set it into the state. Okay, what's going on with our state? Our state is up here. That's going to overwrite whatever is in our customers with what we are passing in as the parameter into set customers. Oh boy, you thought you were done with the event. No, we just updated the state. So we have to come back down to our return, and it's looking at all of this and it's going, none of this has changed. And it's going to look at our loop and go, oh, customers has changed. Okay, what keys are different? What customer IDs are new? Oh, there is a new customer ID that wasn't there before. So we need to go over all of this, add in a new TR with all of the data, the TR, the table row, with all of the data that we just added into the state with first name, last name, all of that good stuff. And then that's it. We went full circle. All right, I've got 9 votes in and it's 8:15. So I'm going to do one more thing. There's always one more thing. If you're an Apple fanboy and watch their keynotes, they always have one more thing at the end. I want to do form validation and then we'll call it a night here. So go back to sharing my screen. I need to get my front end code back over here. Okay. So if I come over here and I'm in my front end, you guys have probably already noticed I've got comma, comma, comma showing up. And if I come down here and I just type in ABC and accidentally hit the enter button, now I've got an ABC in my table. Like, I don't want that there. I want to make sure that every form field is filled out here. So there are a couple ways of doing that. The easiest way is to come up to each of our inputs. So I'm just going to use Command F to jump around, and I'm going to throw a required tag on them. So I'm going to go down to, oops, didn't mean to do a new line there. Find to my next input. That's going to do my address 1. I'm going to do my required there. Now address, last name gets required. Now address 2 shouldn't be required, right? A lot of people live in a house. They don't have an apartment number. So we don't want to require address 2. Phone number. Yeah, I think for a repair shop, we can say that that's required, right? If someone drops something off, we need some way to call them and let them know of the status of the repair. City. Yeah, we probably need to know their address, you know, in case we send them a bill. Or select. Yeah, we need a state. And the zip code, we'll say that's required too. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit add customer, and I get this nice please fill out form field. So I'm going to say ABC. I'm going to hit add customer, and it's going to say add in their address. Okay, 456 123 456. City 123, zip code 123. I hit add customer, and oh God, we got the required fields, but we got commas showing up here, and we've got zip codes that aren't long enough. We want to fix that. So what we're going to do is the address one we'll tackle first. That's probably the easiest. We're going to go back up to our table where we show the address information, and we are going to say, hey, if customer 2 has an address, show a comma, a space, and the customer address, customer.address 2. Otherwise, show nothing. I'm going to save that and come over here. And now you'll notice 123 main, and I set my city to 123. So that's showing up. Now up here, we have commas, but that was before I put in my required field. So I'm actually going to go back into my database and delete out that one row with a delete from query. So if I refresh my page, okay, so now that's better. That zip code without a space is bothering me. So I'm going to throw a space in there. Okay, so that's looking good, but how are we going to deal with our 123? Zip code should be at least 5 characters. So what we're actually going to do is after we collect all of our form data, we're going to come in here and we're going to say if our form data dot zip code dot length is less than 5 characters, alert, yo, your zip code is too short. Fix it. Okay, so I'm going to save and come over here. ABC 123 321. Leave that. I can leave blank. My city is ABC. My zip code is 123. I hit add customer. Your zip code is too short. Fix it. So we think we're off the hook, right? We think we've alerted them. We're good to go. I hit OK. Oh crap! My zip code still showed up, and my form cleared out. Okay, so we need to get creative with that. First of all, we are going to come up here and we are going to say, if our form data is less than 5, alert it, else we don't have to worry about it being too short. So then actually do our API call for us, save it in the database, do all of that work. So what we did is we said, hey, do this form validation. And if it's too short, alert it. Otherwise, now you can actually add in the database. We've validated that that data isn't too short. But we also have this problem down here of our form fields are all getting cleared out. We don't want to clear out those form fields until that data has made it up into the database and we know there aren't any problems. So I'm actually going to take that line out and do another loop down here. Once we get the data back and we've updated the customers, that's when I want to grab my form field of my event target and clear out my form field values down there. So because we've moved them into this else statement, now it won't clear out, not only if the zip is too short, it won't clear out until we get the data back from the database and know that the customer has actually been saved successfully. So I'm going to save on that. I'm going to come over here. And I am going to do my ABC, 1, 2, 3, DEF, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. My city is, and if I do my zip code that's too short and hit add customer, your zip code is too short, fix it. If I hit OK, my data is all still here and it didn't get saved. It did get saved into the database. No, it didn't. That's an old one. OC didn't get saved in. Okay, so if I add my 4, 5 and add customer, now it's going to save in and clear out the form for me. Thought I had cleared out that short one. So now we've got our addresses showing up properly. And you know what? We should probably do that on phone number as well. We should probably say else if form data dot phone number dot length is less than 10, alert So if we go through all of that again, I think you guys can trust me. It will pop up and say, all right, your phone number is missing. Okay, that was the last of it. I'm not going to push it. Tomorrow we can dive into our service orders and start doing table relations, start seeing how we can get customer data showing up on the service order page. I think I am going to remove the appliance notion just so we don't have to go through this all again, just with slightly different tables. So we will practice with our service orders tomorrow, and then maybe cover 2 more topics. We want to cover search, and I want to cover pagination of, all right, now we've got 40, 50 rows showing up here. We don't want them all on the database or on the front end at the same time. So we're going to go over a little bit of search. We're going to go a little over table association and joins. And then I have to cover middleware. I did not cover that from last week last week. So we will do middleware, talk a little bit about authentication, and then we can choose where to go from there. I'm going to write that list down before I forget it. I will not create a homework assignment for tonight, but keep in mind that the weekend homework assignment will be turning in some functional version of this. Everything doesn't have to be functioning. You don't have to get every page working, but you should at least have some CRUD operations, right? You should be able to add a customer, make sure the form is working, make sure that you can see it in your table, make sure that it's saving in your database, all of that good stuff. Completely fine to not code along with me all throughout the week, but just know that some version of this will be due to be turned in. 30-second feedback form Karen posted in Zoom. Please fill that out. If you have any feedback or would like me to go slower somewhere or explain things over, whatever feedback you have, I'm always happy to adapt and see what you guys got. I will stick around for the next at least 4 minutes to see if anyone has questions, if anyone feels like they're 90% there and just needs a couple minutes to catch up. I will gladly stick around. I will also post this code in. I just updated the last Slack message that I sent with the most recent code. So you should be able to pull that from there. Did I miss something in chat? Yeah, we could do that pretty easily, I think, Kyle. Kyle sent a message of, can we make it so the table doesn't get super big so we don't have to constantly be scrolling up or down? I think we can actually, this is where it gets dangerous because you guys know how much I love CSS. We should be able to go to our table body. Let's do it on the whole. Well, it's not going to matter much. Let's do it on our table body, and we can just add a style in here of like max height 200 pixels. Let's go down to 100 pixels. And then we are going to say our overflow is going to scroll. Overflow. Did I get too hacky? 100 pixels should be enough, shouldn't it? Okay, maybe I got too adventurous. Let's try it on our entire table. Oh, come on, that whole thing has to be.
Do you think it's like because we're not using like quotes around it and then PX or something, or either like a
No, in React styling, you're not supposed to put things in quotes, and PX you're supposed to use the numeric value, and if you use the numeric, it assumes that you mean pixels.
I see.
All right, what happens if we just target our height directly? Overflow, do you need a kind of overflow? All right, fine. You want to be a pain? I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out and share a solution with you guys tomorrow.
Hey Max, so I still didn't fix the problem about module not found or whatever. I know you said that it might be like a package not being installed or something, but I'm still baffled. I don't know what it is.
You want to share your screen?
Sure.
Okay, so okay. First of all, let's Control C and run a PWD. Okay, so you're in your home folder. So if you run an LS, you're going to realize that homework 4 is not listed anywhere in there because you're in the wrong folder in your terminal. So if you,
Yeah, so my fault.
so if you pop open your files over on the left in VS Code, and then it looks like you popped open the JS file directly, so you don't have an open folder. So go ahead and hit open folder and navigate to, yeah, hit open folder again, and then don't select the file, just hit open. Okay, now you can right click on homework4.js and open in integrated terminal. And now you should be able to run node and whatever your homework is. If you hit tab, it should autocomplete, and then you could just type in the number. And then hit tab again, and it'll autocomplete the .js. And hit enter, and now your code's running.
Okay, cool. So I guess it's not that. Something else is. All right, dope. I'm gonna check the other files, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Maybe it might just be that, like I wasn't in the right directory or something.
Shaw, we are going to cover pagination tomorrow. We want to do pagination on the server because we don't want to send thousands of user records back. We're only going to display a couple pages worth of them. So we're going to cover pagination on through the database and how we can set that up in our GET request to only send back the pieces of data that we want to show. So we will actually cover that tomorrow. And we will also cover, Kyle's idea is good. And we can, there are two things we could do. We could make it so that when you hit the add customer button, it would just scroll you back up to the top of the page. Or we could make it so the whole table would scroll. I thought I could get off the hook easy with CSS, and CSS like always comes back to bite me. So I will find a way to do that.
Is it, would you be able to show both ways? Remember when you challenged us to figure out that scroll too? And I was one of the ones who did not figure it out. So I would like to see that if it possible.
Well, if you'd like to see me fall flat on my face,
no.
What we can do is we have to do it a little differently in React because we have to use a ref. We can't use document.getElement. Well, I'll show you the easy way. So we're gonna do an ID on our table. I'm gonna take this out because that's not working. And I'm gonna say ID is equal to top of table. And then in our scroll, what we're going to do is we're going to say document.getElement by ID. And again, you should never be using document.getElement by ID in React. You should be using a ref, which is an ref, a reference. But I'm just cheating here. I'm going to say top of table. And because we've got access to that, we can scroll. We can scroll into view. So if I save that and I put something in everything, and I'm going to pull my inspect way up just so we can see it scroll up to the top. If I hit add customer, oh, cannot read property, scroll into view of null. Top of table, what did I call it? Down here. Top of table. I just had my ID wrong. Okay, so let's try again. If I click on it, now it's going to scroll me up to the top of the table. So that's the cheater way of doing it without using refs. Let me see if I can quickly remember how to do it the proper React way. Okay, so the proper React way of doing it is saying, That's in a class-based component. I need a functional component. Oh, you can't use refs on functional components. So you have to, well, you can, you just have to use ref. So I'm going to add in a use ref. And then I'm going to say const table is equal to my use ref that starts out as nothing. And then in my table, I come down here and instead of using an ID, I pass it my ref of table. And now, because we've linked all of that up, I can just say table.scroll into view. No idea if this is actually going to work, but one way to find out. Moment of truth. Ooh, no, it did not like that. I think we just need to add a dot current into that. Dot current is basically refs are super powerful. Refs you can access at different states. Like, do you want to access the ref the first time it loaded, or do you want to access the current value of the reference, like to get access to it? So let's see if that works. Hey, okay, that worked. If you are curious about refs, you can read more about them here. It's basically, that's a rabbit hole. I'm not encouraging you to go down that. I'm just saying if you would like to learn more about advanced React, you can read about them. The reason we need refs, and this is the extent of all of my knowledge on refs, is that React uses a virtual DOM, right? React keeps track of all the individual items that it has rendered. And so when you do document.getElement by ID, you're bypassing the virtual DOM. You're kind of saying, nah, just show me what the browser's figured out, and I'll cheat and reach right into the real DOM that's showing up. Well, React gets really cranky about that because it's like, well, now I can't keep track of what's in the browser because you bypassed me and went around my back and used document.getElement by ID. So the refs are the official way that you can access things that are in the virtual DOM. But it gets a little bit more complicated with functional components, which is why we have to use that use ref hook. Again, if that went right over your head, that's fine. 90% of it goes over my head as well. But refs are just a way that if you have to access the DOM for something like your table, it's kind of like a shortcut that you can be like, heads up, I'm going to need you down the road. I'm going to throw a ref on you. And then down the road, I can reference you using that ref because I put it on you in the render. I will update the code in Slack as well, just in case you're feeling adventurous. You don't have to get that working, just a little bonus. Sometimes you do things live and it doesn't come back to bite you. All right, we're 10 minutes over. I will stick around just for a minute or two, just in case anyone has questions. Otherwise, get out of here. Go enjoy your Mondays. You made it.
So, Max,
3 more days of me.
When you're talking about how sometimes when you do things live, it does work out. And I don't judge you, okay? If I judge you, it's like a 5, okay, out of 5. So
I'm used to doing a lot of live coding, and it's just like you can't. What I'm writing, when I'm just coding myself, it's like I don't expect my code to run the first time. That's an expectation you just learn to. Yeah. It's just unrealistic.
But when you have witnesses, it's like they're performing. But
it's not like we're broadcasting this to YouTube for it forever to be saved
live,
or anything.
Yeah, it's not going out there. Yeah. We've had that before, as we recall, and had to edit some things.
Latonia asked me if I'm ever nervous. There are definitely times where like it doesn't work and I'm like, oh my God, I have forever ruined this concept for you because I did not teach it right. You will never be able to learn it ever again.
Actually, it's kind of better that way.
Yeah, being
That's
able
why I
to
like
think
it when you
through
say
it.
you plan it that way.
Yeah, there are definitely times where I go, all right, I know this is going to be a little tricky. We should build this into the curriculum. That's why I'm so excited about interviews, because I've been on plenty of interviews where I felt like I've needed to break down and cry.
Me
And
too.
so I've got all of those questions loaded up for you guys in practice interviews, of all the tricky ones, all the, wait, what do you want me to answer? I got to think about that. So I can't say with certainty, because I haven't sat in as an observer on any of the other interviews, but my interviews are definitely going to be tough. But they are all realistic questions. They are not things that are out of the norm. They are things that an employer could ask you. So I'm super excited. I start practice interviewing next week. I think my Tuesday and Thursday are already booked. But I do have plenty of other open slots, so feel free to sign up. Looking forward. I know 3 of you have already signed up, but definitely take advantage of those practice interviews. Just because you break down and are crying in a practice interview does not mean that I will hold anything against you if you ever interview with our company. They are practice interviews for a reason. What happens in the room stays in the room. I mean, it's recorded, so you can view it down the road, but
Yeah, but it's not.
For the most part, what happens in the room stays between you and the Hack Upstate staff and whoever you interviewed with. It's not like, we're live streaming these and publishing your interviews live or anything.
So I'll definitely want to schedule with you. I have one this week and I have 2 next week. So we had to kind of spread out. And you know what I'm doing and not doing in this program right now. So you kind of know what questions not to ask me right now.
Oh, no, you're going to get all the questions.
Oh, I'm going to be targeted. I better study. It's HTML again. But the thing is with these interviews, the questions, they're on topic. My husband just took a civil service test for DBA, and a lot of the questions had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with anything related to DBA. And I don't know when they made this test, but it's just like.
Yes, I will tell you almost all the questions I pulled are from our actual interview. And
this is a real company.
TUZAG is a real company. We've got by the time I'm done our hiring round, we'll have 4 developers on staff, and we have about 15 employees total, with plans to be at 250 in 3 or 4 years. So we will definitely be doing a lot of hiring.
Where'd the name come from?
It is made up. It is
totally.
The founder of the company worked at Eric Mower, an ad agency, for years, and has years and years of ad agency experience. And what they figured out is stylistically, a letter that is above the baseline or is an ascending letter at the beginning looks right. And a letter below the baseline looks right, a descending letter, and then a weird letter in the middle. So T is a tall letter, G is a letter that hangs below, and then Z in the middle. And they just thought, oh, let's put a couple of letters around that and call it a day. The only mistake he made was he forgot to check to see if the domain name was available, and it isn't. So our website is wearetuzag.com instead of tuzag.com. We also have tuz.ag and tuzag.co, but people thought we were a made-up company when our domain was either one of those. So we've changed it 3 times and now have wearetuzag.com.
Yeah, I love so that, like, the mascot for Kansas City College, the baseball and stuff, is the Jayhawk. There is no such bird. I love it. All right. No, thank you for everything. You're great.
Don't forget about the 30-second feedback form. I will
Nice.
stick around just for a minute or 2, but you guys do not feel obligated to.
Yeah, I already started it. So. Good night, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Max, this is a really pointless question, just because we're still here. I'm just curious why we don't use other get element by more often. I know there's class name, there's some other options, and I'm just curious why it's always by ID and not something else.
Yeah, One, because we're using React and get element by ID bypasses the virtual DOM. I mean, all the get blah, blah, blah. They all bypass the virtual DOM. So that's not something you want to encourage in React. In vanilla JavaScript, completely fine to use that. And it's encouraged because it used to be that you had to use jQuery to pull out items from your DOM. Or you didn't actually have to, but it would be like 6 lines of JavaScript to pull it out. When you were like, all I want is a quick access to my ID. So for years and years, it was jQuery. Then JavaScript, like 5+ years ago, came out with get element by ID and a couple of the others. And those became a lot more popular. And so that's maybe one reason why you don't see it, is because it is a relatively new feature of JavaScript. The other reason is we don't use get element by class name, because normally in your JavaScript, you want to target just one thing. And because there can be multiple class names, all of your DOM elements come back in an array. And then you either have to iterate over the array or use the 0 index. And so because class names can be reused, if you're being careful with your HTML, there's nothing wrong with saying .get element by class name. But for something where you're like, oh, I want this sum to show up at this specific point on the page, well, now you may reuse your class name in some other section of your HTML, and your sum is going to show up in 2 different places. So normally when you think about interacting with the DOM, you're like, oh, I want it to show up in this one specific point. And that's when you want to use an ID instead of a class name. I think there are a couple others. There's get element by type or tag, where you're like, oh, if I wanted every input tag on the page, I could pull it out that way. But again, for specificity, you want to be careful. You don't want to target too many things. So completely fine to do it in vanilla JavaScript. Less encouraged to do it in React. If you do need to pull something off like React, you can do that with a ref, like we did in the table. The table tonight is a perfectly fine use of a ref. But for the most part in React, there are just other ways around it. Any other questions? All right. Well, you guys have an awesome evening. We'll